Now you talk about terror. I've been terrorized all my day. Hammer all my day.
Hi, I'm Chris Hedges. Welcome to Days of Revolt. Today we're going to carry out part 2 of my discussion on where we're headed economically with the economist Michael Hudson, who worked on Wall Street, has taught economics, and is the author of Killing the Host: How Financial Parasites and Debt Destroy the Global Economy. Welcome, Michael.
It's good to be here again.
So we spoke in the first segment about the parasitic quality of the banks, the hedge funds, the speculative class that has, in essence, cannibalized the country, including, I think, interestingly, industry itself, and forced down the throats of the American public an unsustainable debt peonage, whether that's through student loans, predatory credit card interest rates, where it's that bait and switch where you get 0% interest, and next thing you know, you're paying, what does it go as high as 26%, 23%?
If you miss a payment.
If you miss a payment. Mortgages, with many houses, of course, now underwater because of 2008. And I want to look first at the self-identified liberal class within the Democratic Party, including Barack Obama, who often use the language of economic justice and will even chastise Wall Street rhetorically, but have been as committed to this neoliberal project as, of course, the Republicans.
Well, the key of demagogic politics is to realize that the people who are really backing you are the campaign funders. And your job as a politician is to look to say, I can deliver this constituency to you backers. And Obama was a genius at doing what Donald Trump is trying to do today, at taking a constituency. In column A, he had a focus group list everything the constituency wanted. They wanted debt relief, they wanted better jobs, they wanted higher minimum wage.
Not the trade agreements like NAFTA and...
Right. And then column A that he didn't tell them was what the campaign backers on Wall Street did. And he was picked essentially by Robert Rubin, who then became head of Citibank, who came out of the Goldman Sachs. He was picked by Rubin of Wall Street, and his promise was he was going to really do what any president today is going to do. Your job is to deliver whoever voted for you to your backers who are on Wall Street. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, but especially if you're a Democrat, that's really the Wall Street wing of the American political system. And the Republicans are the corporate monopoly, oil and gas wing of it. And that's really the decision. Well, Obama was, as soon as he got in, Paulson, the Republican Treasury Secretary, was talking to Barney Frank and said, you know, we were supposed to, under TARP, have some of the money to go for debt write-down.
Explain TARP.
Well, TARP was the Troubled Asset Management. It was supposed to treat the banks as if they were troubled. If you're a criminal and you're stealing from people, that's called troubled. There's a lawsuit recently. It's been in the news about the rich boy who hit somebody in a car, and he killed 4 people. And his defense was, it's not my fault, I have affluenza. I'm so rich that I don't have a sense of social sense. So of course I drove away, but I'm innocent because I'm rich. What do you expect? Well, essentially that's the Goldman Sachs view of the economy. You cause collateral damage all over, but that's what Wall Street does. You can't punish them for it. They're just doing, you know, what a predatory financial institution does. So Obama said, no, it's not. I'm not going to do that. He came in and he appointed Wall Street's main lobbyist, one of the most, Tim Geithner.
You spent
his
a lot of
Treasury
time in the
Secretary.
book on him.
Yeah, that's right. Geithner is sort of appears in almost every dirty dealing episode of the book. He was the bagman. He was the person who the FDIC accused of the FDIC wanted to take over Citibank, which not only was broke, but it was a criminalized organization.
Explain it just quickly why it was criminalized.
Well,
Citibank, by the way, was not alone. There were other.
No, there were others, but
Citibank was maybe the worst.
Citibank, along with Countrywide Financial, was making junk mortgages. In other words, these were mortgages called ninja. They were called liar's loans. People with no income, no jobs, and no assets. Now, when you had this movie, The Big Short, as if somehow this genius on Wall Street discovered that the mortgages were all going to go down. Well, if and you have the stories of Queen Elizabeth going to the
asking
economist.
how come none of you knew?
How come one of you knew? The fact is, if everybody on Wall Street calls these mortgages liar's loans, if they know that they're made for ninjas, for people who can't pay, all of Wall Street knew that it was fraud.
Right.
The key is, if you're a criminal, you have to plan to get caught. The plan is, how do you beat the rap? And in Wall Street, if you buy garbage assets, how do you make the government bail you out? That was what the President of the United States is for. Whether it was Obama or whether it would have been John McCain,
Bush,
or whether it would be Hillary today or Trump, their job is to bail out Wall Street and make the people pay, not Wall Street, because Wall Street is the people who select. Basically, the politicians know where their money is coming from. And if you have a campaign contributor, no matter whether it's Wall Street or locally, if it's a real estate developer, you all know who your backers are. And the talent you have as a politician is making the voters think that you're going to be supporting their interests.
What's that great Groucho Marx quote?
The secret of success is sincerity. If you can fake that, you've got it made.
Well, and that's kind of it, because he, there's a Ron Suskind in his book, what's it called, Confidence?
Confidence Man.
Confidence Man. Interviews someone on Wall Street and asks why they're so hostile to Obama when he's so protective of Wall Street. And the answer is, because if we keep being publicly hostile, he always does what we want.
This is like Uncle Remus and the briar patch, when Brer Rabbit keeps saying, "Don't throw me into the briar patch," and finally the fox throws him into the briar patch, and the rabbit runs away. He says, "Born and bred in the briar patch," and runs away and is all happy. That there's a pretense that somehow if a politician talks against Wall Street and can vocalize people's resentment, that somehow he must understand
Well,
them.
that's Hillary Clinton's doing that in spades.
That's exactly it. There's a movie, Seven, by Fellini, the great movie with Nita Ekberg and everybody. And you have the Italian reporter go after Ekberg, and the boyfriend comes up to him and says, "I can understand you," and then whumps. Hits him right in the face. And that basically is what we have here. The politician says to the voters, "I feel your pain. I can understand you." And they think, "Oh, he understands it." And then the politician hits him in the face and essentially backs Wall Street and tries to privatize the pension funds, privatize Social Security, not send a single banker to jail by appointing Justice Department people who are vetted by Wall Street. So essentially Wall Street, your campaign contributors have a veto over who you're going to appoint as Secretary of the Treasury. They want their
Attorney
guy.
General.
Yeah, Attorney General, to make sure that nobody has to pay the price, and the Council of Economic Advisors, who are going to assure the people that Wall Street really is adding to the economy. And if you can only do what the Federal Reserve is doing, Janet Yellen, let's give the banks more money and we can borrow our way out of debt. If only we can have quantitative easing. So the Federal Reserve has given Wall Street $4.5 trillion. Now that $4.5 trillion could have been used to write down the debt. And then we wouldn't have a problem. Then everybody would have a lower living account. The $4.5 trillion could have been spent into the economy.
Well, we could have saved people from being foreclosed
Yes.
and driven from their homes.
But that wasn't what Obama did. I mean, so
Even though he promised
well,
that he would, and then he turned around, he earmarked some money to save people who were being pushed out of their homes, and then he never spent it.
that's right. It wasn't spent, and that's what a number of books by the Sig Tarp, the attorney general for TARP, found out. He said, "Wait a minute, they're not spending any of it. It's all a fraud." And he wrote the whole book, about describing all of the lies that Geithner said. And then when Geithner came out in his autobiography, he reviewed Geithner's autobiography and said, "This man is a criminal and should go to jail." And Geithner was suitably rewarded by giving a job on Wall Street.
Right.
The Japanese call that descent from heaven. When you take your rewards, having sold out the economy to your backers, you get a nice job and end up rich for life.
So let's talk a little bit about what this means for the future, because there's been no brakes put on this kind of behavior, criminal and fraudulent behavior on the part of the speculative class. The bubbles have been reinflated with public funds, and I think you had written an article in Harper's Magazine before 2008 saying we're all going to have it's going to be a big car wreck, and since we're playing the game again, what's going to happen, and are they going to be able to go back and loot the U.S. Treasury the way they did before?
Well, what's ahead, first of all, is that the economy hasn't recovered from 2008. People talk about that there's been a recovery, but the recovery has only been for the 1%.
Right,
and the 99% know they haven't recovered. That's why they're voting for Trump, and that's why they're voting for Sanders. They know that but they're blaming themselves. There's a tendency of victims to blame themselves. And the other part of that...
Well, but let's be clear, the media doesn't explain the economic reality at all. They're always talking about the recovery and...
That's the point. And so the result of the media telling people that is the Stockholm Syndrome, where the victim, the kidnapped victim, identifies with the victimizer, with the kidnapper, thinking if only we can give more money to Wall Street will save us. So if the Federal Reserve can only pump more money into the economy. Well, they talk about the Federal Reserve creating money with the helicopter, but the Federal Reserve's helicopter only drops money over Wall Street. It doesn't drop money over the economy. People don't get the money. It doesn't say we're going to add $200 to everybody's checking account so they can have more money and pay their debts. It's only lending money to Wall Street. And what does Wall Street do? Wall Street lends out money. So the solution to the debt problem that we're in, debt deflation, is to lend even more money. That's what makes it a Ponzi scheme that you mentioned at the beginning of the first half. In a Ponzi scheme, people seem to make a lot of money, but that's because you're really not making profits. You're really getting more and more people convinced that you're making money, and you're paying the early entrants out of the new subscribers. That's what Bernie Madoff did. And the whole economy has become a Madoff scheme.
And largely through real estate, right?
Largely through real estate,
So,
because that's the
your
largest
house,
assets.
the worth of your house ostensibly rises and rises and rises, and you believe that you have created, that is a form of wealth creation.
Well, here's really the problem that existed in 2008. Either Obama could have saved the economy or he could have saved Wall Street. He chose to save Wall Street. And the only way to save Wall Street, if banks have made a lot of bad loans, you have to help them not go bankrupt. And what do? You give them more money. And the theory, the pretense in the media is that, well, banks will make money by lending to industry to build more factories and hire people.
And also, and credit dried up for small businesses and consumers.
That's right. The Wall Street knew that the real estate market was already loaned up. In other words, the game was over. Nobody could pay any more of their income for rent or for mortgage money. They couldn't make much, even more credit card loans. So they began to cancel the credit card exposure. What they did was they gambled on foreign currency.
And student debt. Because it's guaranteed.
That's right. They'd make.
I mean, the government guaranteed.
Well, since the 2008 crash, the government has guaranteed almost all of the new mortgage loans, up to 43% of the income that's guaranteed. Student loans, all guaranteed. But basically, the banks made money abroad, and if you could borrow at 0.1% from the Federal Reserve, then you can buy Brazilian loans, bonds paying 9% or more. You could gamble on writing default swaps in Greece. And in fact, when Greece had that real problem of all the fact that the German and French banks had made too many loans to it, the IMF was going to write off the Greek debt. But then Geithner was on the phone with Europe frequently, and then Obama went to the G20 meetings and said, look, you can't write off the Greek debt because the American banks have essentially turned into horse race bettors. We have casino capitalism. They have bet and promised to guarantee the Greek bonds, and if the Greeks are written down, the American banks go under, and if we go under, we promise we're going to bring you down. We're going to bring down the European banks. Do you really want that to happen? And so the gambles made by Wall Street ended up as almost driving Greece out of the European Union. Wall Street was willing to tear Europe apart politically in order just for the Wall Street investment banks, 4 banks, to make the gains that they made, ensuring that the Greek debt by treating the financial market like a horse race. That's what we are now. It's not really about imperialism draining foreign economies. It's by Wall Street making bets, and essentially it's Wall Street running the European Central Bank, and just like Europe has to do burden sharing in NATO, its financial ministries have to do burden sharing with.
So let's talk a little bit about what this means, where we're headed.
Well, it means that there's not that the markets are not growing because the American consumer has to spend so much money paying the banks and paying taxes that they don't have enough money to buy more goods and services.
And one of the things you pointed out in the book, which I didn't know, is that when we measure the economy, we actually count the paying off of debt, credit card debt, whatever it is, as a form of savings.
That's right. The savings rate jumped way up, but the savings
but it's counted.
But, but to an accountant, if you owe less money, then actually you've done the same as paid it out of saving. So we're in a savings economy, and the savings rate in 2008 was 0. Actually, it was negative 2% when you take into account borrowing from foreigners. And so the whole economy was essentially the consumers were maintaining their living standards by running up their credit card debt and by running into debt and by taking out what Alan Greenspan called cashing out on your house's rising value by taking out a mortgage. But that's not cash. That's taking on more debt. And so you had an inside-out vocabulary that America was going into debt thinking it would get rich, and all of a sudden it finds it's in a state of what you said, debt peonage, where the wage workers and others have to pay any increase in wages they get.
Because you're spending all of your income to service the interest.
That's
rather
right.
than paying off the principal,
yeah.
And that's why wages have been suppressed since the 70s, because the speculative class on Wall Street does not want people to be able to pay off their debt.
This was the one thing that Alan Greenspan contributed to economic theory, the traumatized worker syndrome. Yeah. And he said the reason that you've had this huge productivity gain without any wages is workers are afraid to go on strike or even to complain about working conditions because they're one paycheck away from homelessness.
Right, which is true.
And if they miss a credit card payment, all of a sudden their credit card fee escalates to 29%, or even if they're late in a utility bill,
right.
The bank will raise the fee.
So what does this mean? I mean, what's going to happen?
It means a slow crash. It means what was...
which we've already begun, haven't we?
Yes, we're in a slow crash now. And all of this was analyzed already in the 1930s when it was called debt deflation by Irving Fisher. And the debt doesn't appear in the textbook. Somehow debt, you talk about saving, but not debt. The fact is all money is debt of one form or another. The cash in your pocket is a government debt, technically. It's on the liability side of the balance sheet. And what people thought was an asset all turns out really to be floating kept afloat by debt, and rather than the rising tide of debt raising all boats, it raises the yachts, but the rest of the economy is underwater, to make a metaphor.
And so, spin it out for me. Well, what's going to, I mean,
There'll
we've lost total control of this predatory or parasitic force.
Well, you can look at the future as what's happening in Greece, what's happened in Russia after their traumatic shock therapy. America's in for shock therapy, no matter who wins the presidential.
So play it out for me. What's it going to look like?
That means that more people are going to have higher and higher charges for what they spend for medical care, more for schooling, more just to break even, and they're going to have to either draw down their existing savings, or they're going to have to downsize, or they're going to have to default. The rate of default is still, it's rising very sharply on student loans,
right.
And these are loans that you can't wipe out in bankruptcy.
Not unless you're dead. And then they'll go to your parents if they're still around.
That's the point. The parents have countersigned. But meanwhile, the students who've taken out these student loans are having to live at home with the parents.
Right.
They can't afford to buy a house, and if you can't afford to buy a house, it's really hard to get married. I was in China recently, and my translator there said that the women in China, they're looking for a husband who can get his own house, because you need a house to have children. All that stopped. Well, when you have this phenomenon in Greece or Russia or other places, you have shrinking mortality rates, rising disease rates, shorter lifespans. Latvia followed this policy, and it's lost 20% of its population in the last, since about the late 1990s. You have a huge emigration from Iceland, from Greece. There's nowhere for Americans to emigrate
Right.
to.
Well, you say in the book that really the only option left is a form of debt slavery or revolt.
That's exactly it. But the enzymes that the parasite have sort of inculcated via the control of the media tell people it's not Wall Street's fault, it's not the parasite's fault, it's your fault. You haven't been able to make as much money. Look at all these
but is it
people.
working any? I don't think that the lie of neoliberal economics is being swallowed by larger and larger segments of the population, including the people who are gathered around Trump.
That's right. They know that something's wrong, but they don't know what it is because nobody's spelling out how the economy actually works. And of course, that's why I wrote the book,
Right.
to say, here's what's happening. The reason that I was able to warn about the crisis a year before it happened, I had the charts that were published in Harper's, and the charts were cited in the Financial Times as those who did, mine were the only charts cited for those who did foresee the crisis. Here's how it happened. Anyone who does Wall Street charts of the ability to pay, and this is what happened in the 1920s, anybody who did charts like that can tell that there's an intersection, a breaking point, and there's a crisis. And so America now is having the same crisis that Argentina had, that Greece had, that Latvia had, that Russia had. These economies are our future, and it's going to go down and down in a slow crash.
But could it go down, and what we end up with is, a form of neo-feudalism, a rapaciously wealthy oligarchic elite with a kind of horrifying police state to keep us all in order?
This is exactly what happened in the Roman Empire.
Yes, it did.
You had the Roman historians, Livy, Plutarch, all blamed the decline of the Roman Empire on the creditor class being predatory, and the latifundia. The creditors took all their money and they would just buy more and more land, displacing the other people. And the result in Rome was a dark age, and that could last a very long time. And the dark age really is what happens when the rentiers take over. And if you look at back in the 1930s, what Leon Trotsky said fascism was the inability of the socialist parties to come forth with an alternative. And if the socialist parties and media don't come forth with an alternative to this neo-feudalism, then you're going to have a rollback to feudalism. But instead of militarily taking over the land, like occurred with the Norman conquest, you take over the land financially. So finance has become the new mode of warfare. Not military, except in Europe, of course, but simply financial. You can achieve the takeover of land, the takeover of companies, the corporate raids. The Wall Street vocabulary is one of
Yes,
conquest and wiping out. And you're having a replay in the financial sense of what feudalism was in the military sense.
And in essence, we become a kind of nation of sharecroppers
That's exactly right, having to shop at the company
at
store.
the company store.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that lays it out, and it I think, illustrates the point that we need a vision to counter the vision of predatory, parasitic capitalism. And if we don't get a vision very soon, we're in for a dark age.
And the job of the politician is to promise a nice vision and then double-cross the constituents.
So far, unfortunately, they've done it very well.
Yes.
Thank you, Michael.
It's good to be here.
And thank you for watching Days of Revolt.
Had to eat out the watermelon patch. And you know they put me in a shack